So welcome to the webinar today, Savvy Money Habits, with our guest, Melissa Tosetti. I'm Emilie Goldman. I'm founder of Tamarind Financial Planning. And in my professional life, I'm a financial planner, and I'm passionate about creating financial freedom for busy families. And to me, that means freedom from financial worries that often build up as our families grow and life becomes complex and more busy. And in my personal life, I'm a mom, and I know it's super challenging to manage the busy family schedule, and on top of that, find the time and energy to focus on lifestyle and financial decisions. So I commend you for taking the time today. Our guest speaker today is Melissa Tosetti of The Savvy Life. Melissa is a nationally recognized author, and here you see her book. She speaks and teaches on the topic of personal finance from a lifestyle perspective. And she's the author of the international bestseller, Living the Savvy Life. She teaches college courses on savvy living and is regularly quoted in the national media. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Melissa Tosetti.
Thank you, Emily. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's Savvy Money class. So, as Emily said, my name is Melissa Tosetti, and I am the founder of The Savvy Life. So, what is a savvy life? Well, I'll give you a more detailed explanation in a few minutes, but in a nutshell, living a savvy life, what it's about creating a strong financial foundation while enjoying the journey. And doing that by being very purposeful with where you spend your time and where you spend your money. So it's about finding the balance between saving everything for tomorrow by sacrificing the enjoyment of today, or on the flip side, not saving anything for tomorrow by having too much fun and enjoyment today. So for the past 8 years, I've been teaching Savvy Living through webinars such as this one, in-person classes all across the U.S. And I spend most of my days working one-on-one with individuals and families to help them plug their financial leaks, streamline their spending, create a spending plan, excuse me, and most importantly, to teach them how to live within the plan. So at this point, I've been working with over 400 clients, and I have to say that every morning, I still can't wait to get to my desk to get started working. So I feel very, very blessed that I get to do every day something that I enjoy so much. So on to today's class. Today's class, as I mentioned, we're focusing on savvy money habits. Habits that will allow you to start living the savvy life, and just as importantly, to easily maintain it. So our agenda for today, Emily, do you mind clicking over to the next slide? Thank you. Our agenda for today is I'm going to start by introducing to you the Savvy Life philosophy. I will then explain how money affects everything and the implications of that. I'll introduce to you the golden rule of personal finance, and then I will go into the 9 savvy money habits that you will be able to take and run with after today's presentation. So to start, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask a few questions to get you thinking about how this information might apply to your own life. And if you've been in on any of these sessions before that I've done for Emily, they may sound a little bit familiar, but I think that it will be good to listen to them again and get those triggers again. So we're going to start with that first question, which is, how many of you have a closet overflowing with clothes, so find yourself complaining you have nothing to wear? So too many clothes, nothing to wear. Next question. How many of you eat out more than once a week because there's no groceries in the house rather than really wanting to go to that particular restaurant? So in other words, you're dining out because the cupboards are bare. All right, next question. How many of you have ever walked into a store like, let's say, Target or Costco to purchase a tube of toothpaste and found yourself walking out pushing a shopping cart loaded with bags? Now, whenever I ask that question at in-person events, usually the entire room has their hand raised before I even get the question finished, before I even finish spitting it out. That one is a trigger. And then the last question, and this is really the $1 million question. How many of you were taught about money as a kid. I'm not talking about stocks and bonds. I'm talking about simple day-to-day money habits, putting money into savings, tracking your spending. So that last question is one that I've asked for 8 years, and I many years ago came to a point where I'm not surprised when only a few hands are raised. Simple day-to-day money habits are just not taught here in the U.S. They're not taught by most parents. They're not taught through most schools. And so consequently, we grow up with no money skills, right? We have no understanding or education on how to manage our money. So I am very blessed. I grew up with the most, and I still have, the most amazing parents in the world. And they taught me a lot of very, very crucial life skills. But the one place they did fall down in is in teaching me about money. And so consequently, when I graduated from school, I got myself in a world of hurt financially. And then I decided to move from my hometown of Fresno, California, to the San Francisco Bay Area at the height of the dot-com boom. So moving from a small, farming community to one of the most expensive economies in the world was not a smart move on my part as far as my finances go. But I did know that the Bay Area is where I needed to be and where I wanted to be. And so I realized that I had got myself into this situation and I needed to work my way out. And I talk about how my parents didn't teach me about money, but what my parents and my grandparents taught me was a work ethic. And so very quickly, I was able to get a job at a public relations firm as a receptionist. And I worked answering phones from 7 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I would drive to Sneakers Sports Pub in San Carlos, California, still there, great food. But I would drive to Sneakers and I would wait tables from 5 until 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, 4 to 5 nights a week. And it took me about a year, but I finally managed to pay off my debt and to hand in my beer-soaked apron. And although I didn't have the debt any longer, I still didn't have a lot of money left over at the end of each paycheck. But there was something else that happened in that time frame. Even, let me back up just a little bit. I don't know if you've ever experienced in times where you've gone through kind of a rough patch, very similar to what I went through with having to work 2 jobs, being tired all the time. Very often we'll look back at those times with a little bit of nostalgia. It'll be, we worked hard, but we had good times. When I look back at that time, I have no warm, fuzzy feeling. And I had no time to do anything to go out and explore. The few nights that I did have available, the few days off I did have available, I was so tired that I didn't want to do anything except for sleep. And most nights I was coming home smelling like Budweiser. So these were not good times. And these were times that I did not want to repeat. And so in looking at my finances at that time, like I said, I didn't have the debt, but there wasn't a lot of money left over. And I was very fearful of what to do with the money that I did have left over because, again, I was lacking that education still. And so because of that fear, I thought that if I spent any money on anything that wasn't an absolute need, I was going to have to go wait tables again. If I bought a blouse that I didn't need, or I got my nails done, or went to a movie, I was going to have to go wait tables again. And I knew that I did not want to have to do that. And so consequently, I spent the next 2 years of my life living this extreme frugal lifestyle out of fear, and out of ignorance on how to manage my money. And so very slowly, I started to realize that my problem wasn't a lack of money, although more money is awesome. I'll never say no to more money. But my problem was that lack of education. And once I realized that, well, that's fixable. And so I started to read everything that I could find on day-to-day money management. How should I track my spending? What does that look like? How much money should I be putting into savings? And as I started to read through all this documentation, read through all this information, read all these books and articles, I started to see a pattern, and I started to realize, Emilie, would you mind clicking on that next slide for me? One of the things that I started to realize is that if I save money on the things that are not important to me, I can focus my spending on the areas that are. So now, 16 years ago, this became the philosophy for how I manage my own money. But moving forward, it became the philosophy for my entire business, for the presentations that I do like this one, our book, Living the Savvy Life, for how I work one-on-one with clients. Save on the things that are not important to you so you can spend on the things that are. Define what is important. Define what isn't important. The example that I always give when talking about putting this philosophy into action is of how my husband Paul and I, we love to travel. It is the #1 area where we want to spend our money. And so consequently, we had to find an area in our lives, there are multiple areas, where we could economize, where we could streamline, that would allow us to be able to afford to go on the trips that we want to go on. And so I can say that it was some pretty easy decisions for us, especially one of the biggest areas, which is cars. Paul and I are not car people. Cars are really tools for us to get from point A to point B. And so many, many years ago, we decided that we would create the habit of buying nice, reliable, used cars. And the money we saved by not having two separate, $300, $400 a month car payments, we had put into a travel savings account, and that has taken us across much of the world, with much, much, much more to see still. We've gone across the U.S. and Canada. We have, taken at the time, our 2-year-old son Dante on a cruise up to Alaska, which is awesome. Cruising and kids is great. This is actually a picture of Paul and I in front of the Roman Colosseum. Dante took it, so it's a little bit, it's just a little bit crooked, but it's one of my favorite pictures. But there was one trip in particular that really solidified for me just how powerful this philosophy is. So Paul and I are both martial artists. We've been training in martial arts for about 22 years now. And we had an opportunity in 2001 to travel to China, which is great. Anybody can travel to China. What made that trip so impactful for us is that we had the opportunity to travel to China and to train with the Shaolin monks at the Shaolin Temple for 2 days. A once-in-a-lifetime, extraordinary experience. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago, I was actually showing my son Dante pictures of that trip in our photo album, and it dawned on me that if I was still overspending as a habit, there is no way I would have been able to afford to go on that trip. But on the flip side, if I was still in that extreme frugal mindset, I never would have given myself permission to go on that trip, and I would have missed out on that amazing, ridiculously amazing opportunity. So knowing when to spend and knowing when to save, what that does is it amplifies the power of every dollar, and it's one of the keys to savvy living. Emilie, would you mind clicking the slide for me, please? So one of the things that I've learned in the last 18 years of living this lifestyle, in the last 10 years, 8 years of writing about it, teaching it, and working one-on-one with clients, I've learned that money affects everything. Like it or not, money affects everything. It affects where we live, what we eat, what we wear. It affects what we can do with our free time. And so that's why I teach personal finance from a lifestyle perspective and focus not just on those crucial day-to-day money habits that we're talking about today, but I also teach smart spending in the areas of our home, food, wardrobe, travel, and entertainment. And I focus specifically on those areas because these are the areas that I found that clients that I've worked with struggle with the most. These are the areas where they're overspending, but with the least amount of satisfaction. So again, it's not about not spending. It's not about frugality. It's about being purposeful with your spending and getting the most out of every single dollar. So that long, yep.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in as I have questions. Does that work?
Oh yes, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I love it. I love it for your webinars because they're interactive.
Yeah. Well, Juliana is asking something here that's a really important question, I think, especially as you're talking about how you and your husband are doing these things together. Like, what if you had different priorities? How do you manage that as a couple?
Right. One of the things that I've experienced or that I've learned in working with so many different clients is that it's incredibly common for us to marry our opposites.
Yeah, so then what do you do?
But
you're frugal and he's not. I said, then what do you do? He's frugal and you're not, or the other way around?
Right,
right. You've had different experiences.
And it can be incredibly stressful and a huge strain. So one of my first suggestions would be to sit down and have some very long conversations. And because what ends up happening is when we have differences in priorities, those discussions are usually had when there's something that is when something pops up in the moment, and then there's a decision has to be made, or there's no time to make the decision or talk it out, and then it becomes even more stressful and amplified, right? But what I would suggest initially, and there's a lot more to it, and Juliana, if you want to email me after, I'd be more than willing to talk to you about this or correspond with you about this. But initially, I think one of the greatest things you can do is ask to sit down and just have a nice, relaxed conversation. Earlier in the day is better than later in the day after like the stresses of the day have piled up. But to sit down and try to talk about, map it out. What are the differences between the two of you? Whether one of you wants to travel or one of you wants to be spending money on clothes or whatever that may be. But to map it out and start to see if initially and organically you can start to create some, what's the word I'm looking for? Compliances isn't the right word. Where you can agree on, start to create some agreements there. And if there is still some serious struggles, then it might be time to actually bring in somebody professional. And I can offer some suggestions on that as well. But my email address will be at the end of this because that's that is a very deep question. And everybody's situation and differences, the couples' differences can be different in what the struggles are. That was a very complicated sentence, but hopefully you understood what I meant by that.
Yeah, we could do a whole webinar on that. Maybe we should.
You know, that's not a bad idea. I actually went through a fascinating 18-week money course over the summer, and it was on behavioral money and how very often we do marry our opposites, and what do you do around that. And, you know, money is emotional. Money is psychological and it is emotional. And when you're trying to deal with two different people with two different mindsets on it, yeah, it can be incredibly difficult, but it is fixable. In most cases, it is fixable.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, so money affects everything. Oh, so I owed you, at the beginning of the presentation, I told you that I would give you a longer description of what living a savvy life is about, and I'd love to do that now. So living a savvy life is about knowing where you stand financially on a daily basis so you can make smart money decisions. It's about choosing to purchase only things that you love and make you happy. That's critical. It's about when you go out to eat, it's because you want to go to that restaurant, not because there's no groceries in the house. It's about having a wardrobe made only of clothes that fit, look great on you, and make you feel wonderful. And it's also about enjoying your time off so much more because you've planned for it and know you can afford it. And there's one more descriptor about living a savvy life that bears a little explanation. Living a savvy life is also about creating an environment in your home that is warm, comforting, and expressive of who you are. And the reason that I say that is because in my own personal experience, as well as working with so many clients, what I found is that when you're not comfortable in your own home, you don't want to be there. And when you don't want to be there, it is very likely you are out spending money in one form or another. So something as simple as, not as simple, but something as as simple as creating the process of getting rid of the clutter, of creating homekeeping routines and getting the family involved, that makes such a massive positive impact on your finances. And I know that because of in my own experience and seeing that happen for client after client after client. So that is what living a savvy life is about, not in a nutshell, but in a long, multi-bulleted description. So what's the first step to living the savvy life, right? Before learning how to spend smart on clothes or travel or any of those different areas, it is critical that you start by learning the golden rule of personal finance, and that is to spend less than you make. Can you go ahead and click on that next slide, Emilie? There you go. Thank you. To spend less than you make. Now, this may seem like a very simple concept, and it is a very simple concept, and yet as Americans, we struggle with this. And there's a lot of different reasons why, and I will say that one of the biggest reasons that we struggle with this actually stems from something that is supposed to make our lives easier, and that is banking and technology. If you take a couple steps back and think about how many different ways money comes in and out of your accounts, your checking accounts. You have debit cards, credit cards, automatic payments, automatic withdrawals, automatic deposits, automatic annual renewals, again and again and again. It goes on and on. It can be maddening to know on any given day how much money you have available to spend without spending more than you make, right? And on top of that, it also comes down to habits. So I have clients that I work with that make $50,000 a year and overspend. And I have clients that I've worked with that make $500,000 a year and overspend. It does not matter how much money you make. The way we manage our money is a habit. And so if you're thinking right now that if I make more money, I'll be okay. Again, it's great to want to make more money, and I would never say no to more money coming at me or to anyone, but it can be dangerous thinking. And that's why these clients, they're making $500,000 a year, but they're allowing their expenses to increase with every single pay raise. And so they never give themselves an opportunity to catch up because that's their habit. And I'll talk about how to stem that during one of the habits that I'm going to introduce to you in just a few minutes. So those are just examples of clients I've worked with. But if you pick up a newspaper on any given day, you're going to see a story of an actor, an athlete, a celebrity, a lottery winner who, someone who one way or another earned millions of dollars and lost everything by overspending. People that had every opportunity to save money but didn't. And one of the greatest, most tragic statistics that I've seen in regard to personal finance is that of NFL players. 80% of NFL players file for bankruptcy within 5 years of retirement. These are people that were given contracts, million-dollar contracts, and just increased their cost of living to that contract, to that income amount, and then retired and still had those expenses, but had no way to support those expenses, and so they had to file for bankruptcy.
Melissa?
So, yeah.
I have another question, sort of that same topic, but bringing it back to our community. I think, so the question, I guess, is what if you've sort of built your lifestyle around two incomes and now you're scaling back to one? Like you have sort of that same problem, right?
Right, right.
You've adjusted to one level and now you have to change.
Because of bringing up, having a family, correct?
That's a common one, or maybe a divorce,
Right.
That typically, often, I mean, not that divorce happens, but having kids and scaling back one income maybe to part-time or even not having the second one at all.
Right. So one of the things that I will say is that with let's say in the aspect of having a family, right? A couple, one person decides that they're going to stay at home with kids, the other person's going to bring the income home. What we struggle with in this day and age is that most people have, both couples are working, or both spouses are working, and it actually costs money to work, right? We're eating out more often because nobody's home to get groceries, or everything's going to the dry cleaner, or we have to hire the housekeeper, et cetera, et cetera. And so it especially I believe in the Bay Area, which is where most of your clients are from, when one spouse can stay at home, there are tremendous opportunities for them to be able to help save money. Their job then becomes the CFO of the family, the full-time CFO of the family. So this is one of my favorite types of clients to have, which is this quality of life change, right? And so if that person who is staying at home, now their job is to learn how to spend smarter on groceries, is to be able to cook more at home, be able to save money there, and look for other different ways. One example that we have in our book, Living the Savvy Life, is actually of my friend Carla, who wanted to scale back so she could spend more time at home with her kids, but she didn't want to give up her yoga habit. And so what she did was she went out and approached the woman who owns the yoga studio where she worked out, and they created a deal. 3 days a week, Carla would go in 15 minutes early and check people in, and then she would stay 15 minutes late in case anybody needed anything, and she ended up saving $180 a month on yoga. So it's things like that, because you have a little bit more time, that allows you to be able to be more creative, maybe spend more time in doing a service that you otherwise paid for. Does that answer your question, Emilie?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And maybe certainly not things that are habits, right? Those are habits that would have to form, that would have to, like behavior that would have to change. So it's an interesting question, right? Like, how do you go from being a working person to someone staying home and being the CFO, right? That's a whole skill set.
It is.
And habit formation.
And there can be an education involved in learning that, which is self-education, books, articles online, et cetera. As for people that are going through divorce, I've tons of clients that are going through that process or have gone through that process. And for them, it's a matter of listing all of their expenses, all the different areas where they are spending, looking for the low-hanging fruit. Where can we help them streamline initially? And then, really doing gut checks. What are they getting the most value out of, or where are they not getting the most value, and where can we start cutting from there? And but until you're really looking at your expenses as a whole, it all will just seem, it's all just kind of a bit of a black hole. You have to have it down on paper, and you have to be looking at it. And it does help to have somebody help to look at it from a non-emotional standpoint. So maybe getting a very trusted friend or family member, or that's what I do for a living, is helping clients with that.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So spend less than you make. So let me introduce you to the first habit for how to spend less than you make. Emilie, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that next slide for me, please. All right, so the first one is to pay yourself first. And many of you may be familiar with this idea, which is basically that before any money goes into toward paying bills, you are going to have money automatically put into some type of savings, some form of savings. If you are contributing to your company's 401k, you're paying yourself first. If you're having money automatically put into an emergency savings account, you're paying yourself first. So the beauty of this is you get to not fix it and forget it, but it's just something that you babysit. Every couple of months you're looking to see if maybe you can increase your savings. But it's a habit that gets implemented, as I said, just a couple of months versus something you have to think about every single day. All right? And that's the first one. So the next habit is to track your spending. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this one because this is I know for a lot of people, this is an area of tremendous resistance. And I totally get it, because it's like tracking calories. I always use the analogy of it's like trying to give a cat a bath. When I talk to clients, very gently introduce the idea that maybe they could track their spending. It's 4 paws on the end, on the edge of a bathtub, and no matter what, you're trying to push that cat into the bathwater, they don't want to do it. The clients can be very resistant to it as well. And again, I get it. So what I will often do is suggest that maybe instead of trying to track everything, if this is something you have wanted to do in the past but struggled with, maybe just track some specific areas, some specific categories. Some of the areas that, for clients that I want to just kind of baby step them to tracking their spending, some of the areas that I have them track is groceries, right? Dining out is a big one. And dining out is usually one of the areas where people very often want to start economizing on, because this can be a big black hole for folks. It does take some habit changes though. And very often when you're looking at just how much money you're spending on dining out and looking at the value you're getting out of that money, you start to see that, instead of doing that, we could be saving that money to go on the next trip. And really thinking about it from that terms, if I don't spend it here, what else can I spend it on? And by tracking that money, you can see just how much money is getting blown on that, or how much money you can save. So it's critical. But if tracking your spending overall is something you want to do, which is fantastic, I actually encourage everybody to do that. There's a couple different tools out there that are great. Some are better than others. Some of the tools that clients of mine have used, mint.com, a free website that will allow you to download your transactions and you can categorize them. Quicken is something that a lot of folks use, a personal finance software program. One that I have a lot of clients raving about is it's a website called You Need a Budget, youneedabudget.com. And I did the 30-day free trial just to check it out, and it's very easy to use. I really like it. My only complaint about it is that it is a $5 a month fee for it, which is, if it's helping you save The other thing I would say is that if you don't want to use any of those products and you just want to use like an Excel spreadsheet, set up like a check register, or even a piece of paper and write it down. I have a wonderful, relatively new client that I'm working with in Virginia, and he uses just a legal pad. And it just gives him pleasure to write it out, and he can look at a glance and know exactly where he's standing financially on a daily basis, which is key to savvy living. So give it a try, and take it in baby steps. Like, it's the last thing that I would say is try it for a week. Just try it for a week. And when you get to the end of that week, if you weren't absolutely miserable, try it for another week. If you were absolutely miserable, do it for another week again. Just because if that misery was there, then that may be the reason why you need to do it more. Very often the things that we struggle with are the things that we need the most. And so what I found is that very often just the process of tracking spending, we organically start to streamline our spending because just simply out of awareness. I would not have this habit on here if I didn't think that it was incredibly valuable. And I will tell you, it is the number one habit to help you spend less than you make, because you'll know how much money you have available to spend. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, I was trying to advance the slide out of habit. Emily, do you mind going to the next one? All right. Number 3, set financial goals. I love this habit. I love this habit because this is the difference between wanting to do something, a wish or a desire, and actually achieving it. The difference between a wish and a goal is a deadline and an action plan and taking action, but it starts with the deadline. So if there are things that you want to do, the things that you want to accomplish, very often the folks that I work with, it's travel is what they want to do. I just had a great conversation this morning with a gentleman in Houston. His number one goal, he's a single father of 2 kids, and his number one goal is to get his kids through college with 0 debt on their part after they graduate. And so he has the goal in mind. He has an idea of how much that's going to cost him. And now we define how much money he's going to need to save every month in order to make that happen. So whether it's that college education for your kids or it is a travel saving, a trip somewhere, decide, let's take the example of the trip. So you want to go on a trip to England. First thing is to decide when you want to do it. And let's just say that you want to go to England by Thanksgiving 2018. Now you have a deadline. The next step, and one of the more fun steps, is to do the research on how much that's going to cost you. You need to do the research to know so you can have an idea of how much you need to save for that trip each month, or how to find that money in one way or another, right? And once you have defined how much money you need, then you get to figure it out. Is it something that you can save for each month and you'll hit that goal, or do you need to maybe find some like side gigs for additional income? One of my favorite stories with that in mind is I have a woman who I met through over the years of doing these different classes. She's come to a couple of my classes, and in fact she should actually be teaching them because she is one of the savviest women I know. And she has traveled the world on a side gig that she has where she does tea parties. And she has all of the tea sets, and she makes the pastries and everything. And she gets hired to go into people's homes for baby showers and bridal showers, and she hosts these teas. And she does 1 to 3 a month. And every, 3 to 4 months, I get an email from her. She just got back from some far-flung place in the world simply by hosting tea parties at other people's homes. And so I love that example because we're not defined to just the income that comes from a specific paycheck. If you have a passion for a side gig, there are opportunities there to be able to bring in more money to do the things you want to do. So set your financial goals, set that deadline, figure out how to make it happen, and make it happen so then you can set the next goal. All right, next slide, please. Create a spending plan. I often get asked, what is the difference between a spending plan and a budget? And the answer is nothing. They both tell your money where to go versus you wondering where your money went. The reason that I choose to use the term spending plan is that when I started the business, when I started the Savvy Life, I decided from the very start that I was going to teach personal finance from a positive perspective, not a beat you up, make you feel bad for past money decisions. That is not my style. That is not the way that I work with people. I think that money is a topic. Money is simply a tool. And when we learn the skills to manage it properly, then we get to do the things that we want to do. And so why beat people up for that? If we don't have the skills, we teach them, and then we can make better decisions. With that in mind, when you talk to people or you bring up the word budget, for most people, they get just an uncomfortable feeling, almost like a knot in their stomach from that simple word budget. But if you use the word spending plan, you don't get that same negative emotional reaction or that negative emotional feeling. And it's an accurate term. It is a plan for where you want to spend your money over the course of the next 12 months. And so we create spending plans, and that is one of the habits of living a savvy life. So if you are, at the beginning of the year, and if creating a spending plan is something that you and your family want to do, I suggest creating a structure similar to what we do when we work with clients, and that is to break up your expenses between your essential expenses, the things that need to be paid in order to keep a roof over your head, and food on the table, the car working so you can get that next paycheck. and your lifestyle expenses, the dining out, the travel, the entertainment on the weekends. By breaking those two up, once you define what your essential expenses are, then you have an idea of how much money you have left over for the fun stuff. Okay, so really, it's crucial to look at those two separately. And then the other thing when creating a spending plan, or when I'm creating a spending plan with clients, is I also break up their essential expenses and their lifestyle expenses are broken up by the monthly spending, right? The things that are routine, come up every month, and the intermittent expenses, the things that come up intermittently. One example would be if you don't have your property tax escrowed, every 6 months you're scrambling to find that money. Well, how do you manage that? How do you get off that roller coaster? How do you get off the roller coaster of having to come up with money at the end of the year to make the holidays happen, or coming up with the money when the school year starts to get all the kids closed, right? So the habit or the process that we do to give you an idea for how to manage those intermittent expenses is we define what they are, total them up for the year, and then divide it by 12, okay? So we have an idea of, on a monthly basis, how much money needs to be set aside in order to be able to achieve those intermittent expenses when they come up. And that dollar amount, that monthly dollar amount, gets set aside into a savings account so that that money can build, so when those intermittent expenses come up, the money's there and you get to get off that roller coaster. So in other words, you treat those intermittent expenses like a monthly bill, okay? All right, so create a spending plan. If you have questions about creating a spending plan, I actually do an entire webinar on creating a spending plan. There's a lot here and there's a lot of pieces to this, but I wanted to introduce the idea of it, the habit of it to you. Please feel free to send me an email, or you can ask questions at the end of the session, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that. Okay? All right.
Hey, Melissa, just in terms of stress, like money stress, I think this really gets at the heart of it. I think the intermittent, that's hard to say. Expenses are things that really stress people out. Even you're going to have the money when you get the big property tax bill, or you have to pay summer account fees or whatever. If you have already paid yourself first and set that aside, it's such a relief. I've definitely seen that with my clients, and I think I've heard you talk about that too. Like, that's a major stressor that's so easy to eliminate.
It is, and it's the habit of doing that. And again, once you create that plan, once you define what those intermittent expenses are, divide them by 12, and have that money automatically set aside, you're done. It's not something you have to babysit all the time. And I'll add that the beauty of having worked with so many clients over so many years is that when I touch base with them years later, I get to hear about what really hit home for them, and managing those intermittent expenses and treating them like monthly bills is one of the top things that clients talk about years later that changed everything for them. And there's one more thing that I will add to this, and this goes back to the emotion of money and these expenses as well. I firmly believe that if you do love to travel, it is critical that you have a separate savings account for your travel money. Do not intermingle your travel money with your emergency savings, because if you use the emergency savings, you're going to feel negative feelings because you're dipping into your travel account. If you use it for travel, you're going to have negative feelings because you're going to feel like you're dipping into your emergency savings account. Separate them out, and it will make all the difference in the world. Okay?
Isn't that so interesting, like how our minds work with that? And it really physically changes your stress reaction. It's so interesting.
It does. Yeah. I mean, do you see why I got so fascinated by this topic of money?
And it's such a simple thing, but it's like, wow, it actually changes your experience and your enjoyment of your own money.
It does. Mindset is huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, next slide, please. Escape goldfish syndrome. So I talked about those clients that are making $500,000 a year, $750,000 a year, and still living paycheck to paycheck. And the reason is because as they increase their income, they increase their expenses as well. This is an incredibly common habit here in the U.S. I find it actually quite common, especially here in Silicon Valley, when so many people are making $200,000, $300,000 salaries, and they're complaining because they're 15, 20 years into their career and they are still living paycheck to paycheck. They feel like they should have so much more money stashed for retirement, and they don't. And it was this simple habit of those expenses creeping up. So once you identify that you have this habit of goldfish syndrome, the next step is to implement the next habit on the next slide, which is the 50-50 rule. And I talked about how if you get nothing else out of today's presentation but the spend less than you make habit, I will also say the same about this particular habit, implementing the 50-50 rule, which actually supports the golden rule of spending less than you make. What the 50-50 rule is that as you get pay raises, as you get bonuses, as you get tax refunds, any particular windfall, you're going to take 50% of that money and you're going to put it into your retirement savings account. And very specifically, your retirement savings account. That money is to build your financial foundation. The other 50% is yours to spend as you please, with one hard, fast rule. And that is that you cannot spend that 50% on anything that will create a bill. Meaning, you can spend it on, let's say you get a really great bonus and you want to buy a motorcycle. Well, you can buy a motorcycle outright, but you can't use it as a down payment on a motorcycle that you will now have to make payments on. You get the idea, right? So what I love about this particular habit is that it allows you to build that strong financial foundation. If you implement this habit from now until retirement, you will exponentially build your financial foundation over just putting money into your 401k or other investments. You are throwing money at your retirement. And on the flip side, you are able to spend that other 50% to enjoy now, right? To enjoy the journey. And to me, that is the definition of savvy living. Build a strong financial foundation while you enjoy the journey, and that's what this habit does. Okay? All right, next slide, please. And I'm mindful of the time. I'm keeping an eye on the time. Next slide, pay your bills on payday. I say this every time I get to this slide. I love this habit. And the reason I love this habit is because it helps you to enjoy your money, which may not sound like that as you just read the title of it, to pay your bills on payday, but bear with me as I explain. On payday, or as close to payday as possible, you are going to sit down and do exactly as it says. You are going to pay your bills. You are also going to go to the grocery store and buy your groceries, and you're going to go to the gas station and fill your car up with gas, or if you use mass transit, get your next pass or badge or whatever. So because you've implemented savvy habit number one, you are putting money into savings on a regular basis, so you are building your financial foundation. You have paid your bills, your financial obligations, and you have taken care of your gas and groceries, which are your financial needs. The money left over is yours to spend as you please. It's yours to spend as you please. That is why I love this habit, because it defines for you how much money you have available to spend and to enjoy. And it, once again, another habit that helps support spending less than you make. All right? All right, so give that a try. Next slide, please. All right, know when to invest and when to bargain shop. And the two examples I always give of this is knowing when to invest. If you are in a career, you are going to invest in, especially a corporate career, you're going to invest in your work clothes. You want to look professional. You want them to last as long as possible. if you're going to Vegas for the weekend, you're going to go to H&M and you're going to spend like $20 on 3 outfits. And you're going to go to Vegas and you're probably never going to wear those clothes again. The other example that I give when I talk about knowing when to invest and when to bargain shop is if you live in San Francisco and you have a postage stamp of a lawn, you're very likely going to go and you're going to buy go on a Craigslist or garage sale and get like a little push mower, right? And you're going to, take 2 swipes at your lawn every other month during the summer or every other week during the summer and you're done. But if you are like my mom, who up until a year ago lived on 3 acres, 1.5 acres of which was grass, you are going to invest in a really nice, comfortable riding lawnmower with a cup holder because you are going to spend a tremendous amount of time on that lawnmower. These 2 examples are the purpose of these 2 examples is to show you how we need to think through what we're going to use items for and really decide, is this something that I need to maybe spend more money on because I want it to last as long as possible, or something that I really, really love? Or is this something that I can economize in because I just need it for the short term, or it's not quite as important to me, but it is something that I have to, I have to get. We make so many spending decisions out of habit. And what the idea of this is to make conscious spending decisions instead. And so decide, is when to invest and when to bargain shop. All right, and our last slide, the last habit is to spend money on the things you want. Spend money on the things you want. And right now you may be thinking, well, of course I spend money on the things I want. And yet we walk into stores like Target and Costco for toothpaste, and we walk out pushing a shopping cart loaded with bags. Those weren't necessarily things you wanted. They were things that distracted you. Stores spend millions and millions of dollars to try out ways, to discover ways to get you to part with your money. The way Costco is set up, where we have the big screen TVs and the jewelry and all the high ticket items at the very front, right? You walk past those and subconsciously you're thinking, oh, didn't buy a big screen TV today. And then you look over and you're like, ooh, samples. And you start eating your way through Costco, as we all do, right? And then by the time you get to the checkout center, you look down at your cart and you realize that you could have bought a big screen TV based on how much you have in your cart. Well, the reason Costco does that is because they know that willpower is a habit. This is something that scientists have discovered just in the last 10 years or so. Willpower is, I said a habit. Willpower is like a muscle. It's not a habit. It's a muscle. And it gets fatigued throughout the day. As you make decisions, as you power through different decisions, you get more and more tired. And when you get more and more tired, you get to the point where you just don't care anymore. It's one of the reasons why when we're trying to change our nutrition habits, let's say we're trying to diet, right? It's January, it's common. And you may, rock star through breakfast, do great at lunch, dinner a little bit iffy, but come 8 o'clock at night, you're in the are in the freezer with a pint of chocolate ice cream, eating directly out of the container. We just ran out of willpower, and stores know that, and so they set their stores up with that in mind. And so the way to implement savvy habit number 9, spend money on the things you want, is as you approach the checkout counter, or if you're online shopping, as you go to checkout, you are going to look at your cart, and of each of those items that were not on your list, of what you originally came in there for, you're going to ask yourself 2 questions. The first question is, do I need this item? Meaning, do I need this item, and am I going to use it before the next time I come back in this store? And if the answer is no, you've got one more shot. And the next question you're going to ask is, am I madly in love with this item? If the answer is yes, and you can afford it, go ahead and put it back into your cart. If the answer is no, you're going to go ahead and put it back, or you're going to give it to the clerk and say you changed your mind. And that is the moment that you took control of your spending and didn't allow yourself to get influenced by retailers. And I want to be very, very clear. I am not anti-retail whatsoever. I love Target and Costco. In fact, I will be at Costco in about 4 hours. But I want to make sure that I'm the one making my spending decisions and I'm not getting influenced. And so try that habit out. The next time you go to the grocery store, the next time you go to the mall, as you approach the checkout counter, just inventory what you have and make conscious decisions. Are these things that you're madly in love with or that you need and are going to implement? And then make your purchases or don't make your purchases from there. So be purposeful with where you're spending the money. And the last thing I'll leave you with before we wrap up is just to really hit home that savvy living is really just a matter of smart spending. Your financial goals, your dreams, they are within your reach. You can make them happen. I see it every day with clients. You can do the things you want to do. You can buy the things you want to buy. You can visit the places you want to visit and still be financially responsible. So spend smart. All right?
Thanks, Melissa.
And my pleasure.
That was great.
I'm happy to answer. If anybody else has any other questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Or if you have questions that you want to take offline, you can send me an email at my email address right there.
That's great. I was just thinking about Costco and Target and how you helped me so much with my kitchen and shopping, grocery shopping. And even though I love Target and Costco, I pretty much don't go there anymore. I think what you helped me see was that even though I could save money on a particular item, like it takes so much effort to not do that impulse buying. It's like I could actually save more money just by going to the more expensive grocery store in San Carlos.
Right.
To get the few things that I don't get at Trader Joe's. So I narrowed down the stores that I went to and I spent less money.
You streamlined.
So I don't get the best bargains on the individual things, but overall I'm staying within my budget. But that's another way. Not to get sidetracked, don't go there. But I work right across the street from Target now and down the street from Costco, but I just don't go. That's my new habit. I just don't go there.
Now that I think about it, I'll be at Target later today too.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure you have total self-control. Like you have these habits ingrained in a different way. But but I think that but the work that you do is really helping people figure out the habits that are going to work for them, and then practicing those behaviors till they become habits.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's once you get the habit of it and you start to see, like I have a couple clients I've worked with that have talked about they'll look at something now that they would have picked up before and they'll ask themselves, are you going to be in my garage sale pile, 6 months from now?
That's great. I love that question. Yeah.
Oh yeah, or do I really want to dust you every day? That was another one that a client I was about. But it's just, again, it's creating those conscious decisions. You and I talk about this all the time. We move so fast. We're going 1,000,000 miles an hour in 1,000 different directions, especially all of us living here in Silicon Valley. We are on autopilot 80% of the time when we're not at work. And we need to pull out of that. And when we can start streamlining our spending, maybe we don't need to work quite as hard because we're not spending as much money. Maybe we have time to do the things that we want to do because those things have been clarified and maybe they're not financially based. So it's powerful. It's consciousness.
Beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I really appreciate that. I love the presentation and we had some good questions. And we're going to wrap up here and look forward to seeing you. We have another, I don't have the date in front of me. But you can check my website. I think everybody has that because I sent you a bunch of emails. TamarinFinancial.com. Under my Learn tab, you can see our upcoming webinars with Melissa and some other ones as well. Thanks for joining us and have a great weekend. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Emily. It's always a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.